Hi, my name is Jack Newdorf, and I'm one of the school psychologists here at Lynbrook High School. I'm also part of the Lynbrook High School mental health team, along with Jenna Starnes, school-based therapist, and Dr. Brittany Stevens, school psychologist. Today, we're going to give you a brief presentation on sleep and its overall effect on your well-being. We're going to take turns presenting some information, including how sleep affects your body, why it's important, and some things that you can do immediately to help improve your sleep quality. I hope you find it useful.
Sleep is a biological requirement, as essential and valuable as good nutrition and exercise. It is an active process that energizes and restores your brain and body. Getting enough, uninterrupted, and restorative or quality sleep gives you the potential to thrive and makes it possible to live a full life. Sleep is essential to your ability to perform both cognitive and physical tasks at your peak, as well as your ability to handle the stressors, demands, and challenges you may encounter. While sleep needs and patterns change from childhood into adolescence and through adulthood, sleep still plays a vital role and contributes to every aspect of your development, physically, psychologically, emotionally, and socially. Sleep is important for several reasons. First, it allows time for the brain to fully process information. Sleep produces alertness, improves memory, and enhances our ability to learn. It's a biological requirement that helps us perform effectively and safely. It's also essential for development. It's when our body's maintenance, repair, and growth system goes into effect, particularly during adolescence. Sleep allows the brain to forge new pathways, make memory connections, repair muscles, and grow. It's a key to our health that studies show is every bit as important as good nutrition and regular exercise. In fact, research has consistently shown that getting good sleep is associated with good health and can help prevent illnesses.
Let's look at the consequences of sleep deprivation. We know that there are cognitive, social, and behavioral impairments in our performance. Our school performance definitely goes down, tends to lead to lower grades, and we have an increase in tardiness and absence from school because it's really hard to pay attention and even get to class when we are so tired. Obviously, we know that there's difficulty remaining alert. And this attention piece is really also important when it comes to driving and just being more injury prone. We know that drowsy driving is similar to drunk driving, so there's a huge increase in risk for accidents. There's also an increased risk of acting on suicidal or self-harm thoughts when we are sleep deprived. So sleep is incredibly important. So now let's also look at what would happen to our bodies and our brains if we got 2 hours less of sleep each night.
For many people, sleep is a burden which they would love to do away with. I mean, imagine how much more you could do in a day with 2 extra hours. But what would actually happen if you cut out 2 hours of your sleep every night? First, we need to understand how much sleep your body and brain actually need. The vast majority of research on the topic has concluded that around 8 hours of sleep is optimal for the average person. But today, almost 50% of people get 6 hours or less each night. Now, the first night of less sleep may actually trigger the mesolimbic system, releasing dopamine and giving you a sense of adrenaline. But your brain slowly begins to shut off the areas associated with planning and making decisions. And even though you may still feel fine getting 6 hours, the truth is actually much darker and worrisome than you might realize. Scientists use a technique known as psychomotor vigilance tasks, or PVTs, to understand the impact of sleep deprivation on humans in studies. Simply put, it's a reaction test. A red button randomly turns green, and people have to push it as fast as possible. Not so surprisingly, those who get 8 hours of sleep over a 2-week period show very few lapses in attention and no cognitive declines. But those groups that receive either 6 or 4 hours of sleep see declining PVT results on almost a daily basis for the entire 2-week period. Of course, the 4-hour group performs the worst. But these results don't just show a loss of concentration, they show full lapses in awareness called microsleeps. In other words, their brains aren't just slower, but shutting off for moments at a time. When looking at the results deeper, scientists concluded that getting 6 hours of sleep for 10 days in a row was the same as not sleeping for 24 hours straight. That's the same cognitive decline as being legally drunk. And if you get 4 hours of sleep for 11 days, it's like you haven't slept for 48 hours straight. These studies also show that participants were not at all aware of their cognitive declines. In other words, when you're tired, it's like being that drunk person at a party who insists that they can drive home fine. Other tests show that your ability to memorize and retain information, or even do simple math or problem solving, decline at similar rates. But perhaps the scariest fact is that even after one night of 4 or 5 hours of sleep, your natural killer cells, which stop cancer cells from proliferating in your body, drop by 70%. You're also more likely to catch a cold because your immune system is weakened, which is why when we're sick, we feel compelled to sleep so much. Chronic lack of sleep is also linked to bowel, prostate, and breast cancer, and people over 45 who sleep under 6 hours a night are also 200% more likely to have a heart attack or stroke. Even the World Health Organization has classified any form of nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen. So even though you may swear that cutting 2 hours of sleep makes you so much more productive and that you don't feel any worse, just remember that every single day your cognitive abilities continue to decrease, costing you much more than you may have bargained.
Research is clear that getting adequate, high-quality sleep on a regular basis is crucial for optimal functioning and performance, not to mention emotional stability and emotional regulation. Fortunately, there are several easy and straightforward tips and hacks and slight adjustments that everyone can do, which have been shown to immediately and dramatically improve sleep quality. So let's look at a short clip by Dr. Matthew Walker, who wrote the book Why We Sleep. He'll break down a couple of strategies we can use into manageable, user-friendly pieces.
We can all have a bad night of sleep, and that's perfectly normal. But how can we try to improve both the quantity and the quality of our sleep? Here are 6 scientifically grounded tips for better sleep. The first tip is regularity. Go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time. Regularity is king, and it will actually anchor your sleep and improve both the quantity and the quality, no matter whether it's the weekday or the weekend, or even if you've had a bad night of sleep. And the reason is because deep within your brain, you actually have a master 24-hour clock. It expects regularity and works best under conditions of regularity, including the control of your sleep-wake schedule. Many of us use an alarm to wake up, but very few of us use a to-bed alarm, and that's something that can be helpful. The next tip is temperature. Keep it cool. It turns out that your brain and your body need to drop their core temperature by about 1 degree Celsius, or around 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, in order to initiate sleep and then to stay asleep. And this is the reason that you will always find it easier to fall asleep in a room that's too cold than too hot. So the current recommendation is to aim for a bedroom temperature of around about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or a little over 18 degrees Celsius. It sounds cold, but cold it must be. The next tip is darkness. We are a dark-deprived society, and in fact, we need darkness specifically in the evening to trigger the release of a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin helps regulate the healthy timing of our sleep. In the last hour before bed, try to stay away from all of those computer screens and tablets and phones. Dim down half the lights in your house. You'd actually be quite surprised at how sleepy that can make you feel. If you'd like, you can wear an eye mask, or you can have blackout shades, and that will help best regulate that critical sleep hormone of melatonin. The next tip is walk it out. Don't stay in bed awake for long periods of time. And the general rule of thumb is if you've been trying to fall asleep and it's been 25 minutes or so, or you've woken up and you can't get back to sleep after 25 minutes, the recommendation is to get out of bed and go and do something different. And the reason is because your brain is an incredibly associative device. The brain has learned the association that the bed is this trigger of wakefulness, and we need to break that association. And by getting out of bed, you can go and do something else. Only return to bed when you're sleepy. And in that way, gradually, your brain will relearn the association that your bed is this place of sound and consistent sleep. The fifth tip is something that we've actually already spoken about in detail in this series, which is the impact of alcohol and caffeine. So a good rule of thumb here is to try to stay away from caffeine in the afternoon and in the evening, and certainly try not to go to bed too tipsy. The final tip, have a wind down routine. I think many of us in the modern world, we expect to be able to dive into bed at night, switch off the light, and we think that sleep is also just like a light switch, that we should immediately be able to fall asleep. Well, unfortunately, sleep isn't quite like that for most of us. Sleep as a physiological process is much more similar to landing a plane. It takes time for your brain to gradually descend down onto the firm bedrock of good sleep. In the last 20 minutes before bed, or the last half an hour, even the last hour, disengage from your computer and your phone and try to do something relaxing. Find out whatever works for you, and when you have found it, stick to that routine. The last thing I should note is that if you are suffering from a sleep disorder, for example, from insomnia or sleep apnea, then these tips aren't necessarily going to help you. If I was your sports coach, I could give you all of these tips to improve your performance, but if you have a broken ankle, it's not going to make a difference. We have to treat the broken ankle first before we can get back to improving the quality of your performance. And it's the same way with sleep. So if you think you have a sleep disorder, just go and speak with your doctor. That's the best piece of advice. Where do we stand then in all of this conversation about sleep? Well, I think the evidence is clear. We can think of sleep almost like a life support system. In fact, some may even call sleep a superpower.
In addition to the ones mentioned in the video, there's a lot of great sleep tips, habits, hacks, and routines out there. We wanted to curate a list of some of the most immediately applicable, easy, and straightforward ones that you can utilize that are designed to give you the most bang for your buck. The first would be to schedule your sleep hours and make them non-negotiable. Treat your sleep hours as one of the most important appointments on your daily schedule. Select your desired wake-up time, or the time you usually set your morning alarm, and work backwards 8, if not 9 hours from there, and schedule that time to be uninterrupted. This might mean stopping your leisure activity of choice, social obligations, or the last-minute homework you're trying to complete, putting it down, and picking it back up the next day after you're well rested, because the sleep appointment is one that you cannot miss. The second would be to avoid caffeine after 12 p.m. Half-life is a term that means it's the time it takes for half of a drug or a substance to be eliminated from your bloodstream. And the half-life of caffeine is up to 5 hours. So if you're consuming it in the afternoon, whether it's a cup of coffee, tea, or energy drink, it's still going to be circulating through your bloodstream at around the time you're trying to go to bed. This will not only disrupt your overall sleep quality in terms of the sleep cycle, but will negatively impact your ability to fall asleep quickly and efficiently. The third would be to have a wind down routine or practice some digital detox before your desired bedtime. This means at least 30, if not 60 minutes before your scheduled bedtime, you're putting your devices or electronics away and avoiding screens. Just looking at an LED screen is engaging to the brain in terms of light exposure, but even worse is the content on there is designed to maximize user engagement. Apps, games, videos, social media, all employ teams of highly paid professionals like behavioral psychologists, whose job it is to keep your eyeballs on the screen as long as possible. For extra credit, check out the documentary The Social Dilemma on Netflix if you would truly like to watch an unintentionally scary movie. A couple more tips here. Engineer your sleep environment to maximize sleep quality. This was mentioned in the previous video, but we tend to sleep better and deeper if it's a cool environment, as well as a dark environment. And we all have different bedroom setups or sleep environment setups, but you can use an eye mask or an eye pillow to block out the light if that's not possible to do with ambient light from devices or shades. And also keep it quiet. Again, with respect to everybody's difference in their sleeping situation, using earplugs can be a really effective technique to help you maximize the sleep quality with engineering your sleep environment. The next would be to avoid long naps if possible. Our human brains and bodies really thrive with a consistent routine. That's the same thing over and over again, especially when it comes to our sleep routine. So we want to engineer, like we previously discussed, 8 or 9 hours consistently every night around the same times, and a nap might throw that off. Research says that 20 to 40 minutes is about the longest you'd like to do if you do absolutely need a nap, but anything longer than that will disrupt what's called the sleep architecture, or the type of sleep we get in our evening sleep cycle, especially that deep, slow wave, regenerative, restorative sleep. So you want to avoid long naps, anything longer than 40 minutes if possible. And then finally, beds are for sleeping only. This is, again, related to our brains and bodies craving consistency, the same thing over and over again. So the thinking behind this strategy is when you climb into bed, you want your body to associate that with, oh, it's sleep time. If we're studying or texting or socializing in our beds, our bodies and brains may get confused, and that will make it harder for us to actually fall asleep quickly when it's time for sleeping. So try to avoid studying or gaming or using devices in bed, and only actually climb into bed when you're ready to go to sleep. Okay, we're going to turn it back over to your teachers. But before we go, we wanted to thank you for taking the time to check this out this morning and bearing with us. Hope you found this a little bit interesting, if not at least informative. In a time where we're all really likely to feel more worn out, exhausted, spread thin, overwhelmed, stressed, and or anxious, engineering or switching little aspects of our sleep and prioritizing it is something tangible that we can do, and immediately. Even better is these things are clinically proven to help, and you can experience some of the benefits right away. So we encourage you to try some of those takeaway tips from the previous slides and see what you think for yourself. Thank you again for your time, and have a great rest of your day.